So let's start by saving our scene file. It's always a good place to begin. I'm going to come to File, Save As. I'm just going to create a new folder called Branch Growth. And let's call our HIP file something sensible, branch growth _01. I'm going to come down to our animation options here. I'm going to set our frames per second to be 25, and for frame range about 125 frames or 5 seconds I think will probably cover this. So in the downloads that you'll get with this course, you'll have two folders here. There's a geo and a text. It's just a 3D model and its associated texture that goes with that. So if we select those, let's just copy and paste that into the same folder we just made, right next to our HIP file. So now in our object context, let's put down a new geo container. We'll call this setup. And let's dive inside, put down a file SOP, and let's just link that. We come to HIP, geo. Just going to put our driftwood model final OBJ. Might take a second or so. It's a bit of a dense mesh, but this is just a 3D scan that I took near where I live. It's a nice piece of driftwood. The resolution isn't huge. It's certainly not mega scans, but I think it will work fine for what we're doing. And also it's free. There's no copyright, so I can pass this on to you and you can do with it whatever you like, really. Let's have a quick look at the texture map as well, just so we've got an idea of what it looks like. I'm going to put down a UV quick shade, just a quick way of visualizing this. And under the texture map, let's just load to our HIP text. Let's load our driftwood 8K PNG. So this is kind of the deal. I think it's going to be a good fun little thing to just scatter our instances across this and have them grow along the length of this branch. So I'm going to delete that. I don't need to see this right now. And let's just set up a camera for rendering. So I'm going to come up here to our camera and just press Control and click on that to create a new camera. Let's call this render cam before we forget. And let's come to our view. I'm going to set the focal length to probably around 85, just to give it a nice long lens feel to this shot. Let's click on this padlock here just to lock it to our viewport, and let's just move this into position. Kind of thinking this sort of 3/4 style view, just having the branch stretch across the frame diagonally, and we can have things grow along this length like this. I may change the setup for this and the angle a little bit, but something like this for now will be fine just for setting things up. So if we come to our render cam, let's just round these off a bit. I'm going to go 1.31 and 0.08. Let's go 1.3, maybe 1.33, minus 20.7. Let's go 44. And this is about 0. So this is nicely evened off now. And let's also just come to our little drop down here and just choose clean transforms just to zero all these out. So now if I do accidentally move the camera around, I can just Control and middle mouse click on these to set these back to 0. Let's also just disable this checkbox so now we're not moving the camera around anymore. We're going to do all our setup inside of this geometry container here. This is where we'll do all our work, and then we're going to set up a couple of other geometry containers that we'll just use for rendering only. So we'll have one here for our branch and probably another one for our instances, maybe a few others if we need it, but let's just set up one for our branch for now. So I'm going to put down a new geo container. Let's call this render branch. just tap C. Let's just give it a color like this gold so we know that it's different from the others. And if we go back to our setup, let's just put down a null here. Just going to make it nice and easy for us to select our model from the start. We'll just call this model in capitals. Just going to select that and just press Control C to copy it. Then we're going to come back up, dive inside our render branch and put down an object merge. And let's just paste that into our object field here. So it's going to drop this inside our container. And change our transform into this object, just so that if we do move this top node around, it's going to stay where it is. So that's about it to start with. We've loaded in our 3D model. We have set up like a little render target here for our branch. We've set up our render cam. In the next lesson, we're going to quickly set up some lights, materials, and some basic redshift settings. I like to sort of have this set up from the beginning, as it's quite nice to be able to kick off a little render and just see how things are looking while you're working. It kind of helps maybe inspire some of the R&D look dev later on while you're working, rather than leaving it to the very end. So we're going to set up that next, and then we can move on.